Hi, I'm John Twist of University Motors. This morning I was out driving an MGA and I was reminded how often I receive phone calls from MGA owners saying, "Help, my car is overheating." So I thought I'd address that problem in today's video and just talk a little bit about what MGA overheating is. First of all, a car never really overheats. I mean, the true definition of overheating doesn't come until the car boils over while you're driving it. If it boils over while you're driving it, it is most definitely overheating. If it doesn't boil over while you're driving, it's not overheating. As long as there's water or coolant in the radiator and engine, the car cannot be damaged because water can only get up to a certain temperature, and it's far above that temperature where you start to get horrible problems inside the engine. Running an engine without water is certainly a plan for a quick death for an engine. As long as it's got water in it, you're all right. And those things will run up to 230. You know, that's pretty hot, but they'll run at 230. Modern American cars do run at those high temperatures. So the first indication you've got of what's going on is the temperature gauge on the dash. Now, just as the temperature gauge takes a while to come up to running temperature, the corollary is true, and that is when you turn the engine off, the latent heat in the engine increases the underbonnet temperature, and the temp gauge will spike. The temp gauge that you just took a look at is reading a solid 20 degrees higher than it was when we were driving down the road. This causes a lot of problem today because modern gasoline boils at a very low temperature. So when the underbonnet temperature rises and you get back in the car after 5 minutes or so, it will not start. It pops and snorts and backfires and cracks and crackles, and it just will not start. Open the bonnet, let it ventilate, wait another 10 minutes or so, it'll start just fine. So that is a problem with modern gasoline. I don't know how to solve that. But let's talk about the running temperature. When you're running down the road, the temperature of the engine should be that of the thermostat setting. If you've got a thermostat that's rated at 180, the temp gauge ought to be reading 180. It's 190 degree thermostat, the engine ought to be reading 190. Well, with these old-fashioned gauges, which are calibrated in degrees, there's always a chance that the gauge is wrong. So you can always take the bulb out of the head, put it into a pan, boil the water in the pan with a bulb in there, and just see if, when it's boiling, your gauge on your dash does read 212. Or for those of you in another market, I guess 100 degrees centigrade. So there's always a chance that the gauge is wrong. Anyway, let's talk about what really happens on an MGA, and the common complaint is that they run hot, and in fact, they do. Let's take a look at the front of this car. Come on. Remember that of the gallon of gasoline that you purchase, 1/3 goes out as heat in the exhaust, 1/3 goes out as heat in the radiator, and if you're lucky and the car's tuned well, the remaining third goes into power, which is available at the flywheel. And that's eaten up by heat in the clutch and the gearbox and the drive shaft and the differential and the tires, until finally you're left on an MGA with about 50 horsepower at the rear wheels to push the air out of the way as you're driving down the road. But of that third, if it's tuned well, the third part of the gasoline has got to be evaporated. The temperature has to escape into the atmosphere, and that's done by pushing a lot of air through the radiator. Now, if we have a radiator grill that looks like this, yeah, it looks pretty open. I mean, the slats are kind of on an angle, and the air can get through there somewhat. Isn't as bad as some. And then the air runs through the radiator, and as long as the fan is sitting close to the radiator, it'll draw through. Let's go over and take a look at another MGA here, which very well might have overheating problems. The shop is a labyrinth today. We've got a lot of work going. Eli's going to shoot down on this grill, and you can see that that nowhere nearly as much air can get out of this grill as through the former grill. So one of the cheap tricks is to turn every single one of your bars in the grill a little bit so that more air can get through the radiator. We'll look at one at the very end outside, which is a Mark II grill, and that's even different from these. That third amount of energy that you're getting out of the work or heat that you're getting out of the engine available at the flywheel, which is a theoretical maximum, is controlled so very, very much by the timing. And I cannot emphasize enough that you should set your timing at 32 degrees before top dead center, vacuum disconnected at full advance, which is usually between 3,000 or 4,000 RPM. That's where you want your timing to be correct. You can set it at idle, but you don't run around much at idle, and the car doesn't make much energy or make much heat at idle. Where it's making the heat, where you want it to be running perfectly, is up at that 3,000 to 4,500 range, 3,000 to 4,500 RPM range. That's where you want the timing to be 32 degrees before top dead center. So, check your timing, make sure your grill slats are open, and if all that fails and you're still not overheating, you're not boiling over, take a piece of masking tape and put it on the temp gauge, really. Let's go out and look at this last one outside. Well, it's much brighter out here, and I'll tell you it's a lot hotter too. Let's take a look at this Mark II, the grill on this Mark II. Some people say the reason they changed the grill on the Mark II was to get more airflow. Others say, oh, it had nothing to do with the airflow, it's just a styling change. I don't know which is correct. But you can see that these slats are more open than that one that we just saw just before this. And this car, my own car, 62 Mark II Deluxe, always runs at the temperature setting. This thing is great. It hardly ever overheats. So, anyway, in the end, all MGAs run warm. At one of the Namgar GTs, the guy that won the Hard Luck Award showed his plastic shoe to the whole audience, and the side of it was absolutely melted from the heat that came through the gearbox tunnel. There is some more modern stuff you can get now to insulate those tunnels. That's nice too. Anyway, that's the long and short of MGA overheating. If you're in central Pennsylvania, anywhere around Pennsylvania, I'll be there the weekend after Labor Day. So until later this week, and we tune in again, or until Pennsylvania, see you later.